had to shoot a lot of clean audio and sound effects. I'm sure we've all seen the funny clips of creators trying to pose for the thumbnail and get a bunch of different angles so that you have options. Alright, so here I've got a perfect example of some non-linear filming. Hello friends, and welcome or welcome back. I'm Shannon Makes, historical customer by day, circus artist by night. And last week I started to give you a glimpse behind the curtain at what goes into making one of my videos. Only there was so much to talk about, I had to split it into two parts. If you haven't seen part one, I highly recommend to pause here and go watch it first. I go a little bit into how I film my videos and what I think about when I'm framing up shots. Now, for part two, let's consider how to turn those shots into a cohesive story and an interesting video. Let's say I've been sewing most of the day and I'm tired and hungry and I know I should stop sewing before I make a mistake. Well, the day isn't entirely over yet because once I've stopped sewing, I still have to deal with all that footage and transfer it over onto my computer. Ideally, everything gets sorted and imported all in one step, being put into folders that follow my own personal organization system that generally helps me edit it all a bit faster. Then, while the files are transferring, I also take some quick notes about what I did that day before I forget, including if there was anything unusual that happened, things that went well, things I had to change, maybe unexpected hiccups or discoveries. Basically, anything that will help me remember days or even weeks from now what parts of the journey I want to highlight. So now I'm at the point where I need to start pulling the footage into the editor and seeing where I'm at in terms of time. Now, some projects when I'm on a really tight deadline or I just have the mental energy for it, I will do a rough edit as I film. So like every night after filming, I'll go through and do a very rough, choppy edit of that day's footage. But every single time that I've done that, I end up with an insanely long video. So now I tend to do it a bit more at the end of the project, but this one, because I have almost no mid-project narration because of all the construction noise, I really don't have a great feeling for where this project is at in terms of timing or pacing or style. So I think it's going to be most helpful to take the morning to do all of that now, get that rough edit out of the way, and that's going to kind of help inform how I want to film the rest of the video. Also, just for that tiny little clip right there of me talking to the camera, I had to go around and close every single door and window in my apartment building so that you had any chance of being able to hear my dialogue without crazy garbled background noise. So another little insight behind the scenes of filming these things for you. However, since I am going to be sitting down and editing for probably at least an hour now, and it is really hot outside, I think we can finally open this doors up. Can somebody please tell me why I have 30 clips in the folder marked hem? Is there a reason why I needed 30 clips of me sewing the hem of this skirt? Okay, well, that took much longer than I thought. It always does, but it was super helpful because I now feel like I have a much better overview of where I'm at in the project and also maybe a sense of where I'd like the video to go. It is a bit hard to plan in advance for this project because, again, the construction is just making it really hard for me to speak to the camera in real time or even to plan when I might be able to sneak a word in here or there. So I do think it's going to be mostly narrated after the fact, but today is Sunday, so maybe I can sneak a bit more talking head in here or there. I have also been making some lists as I go through, even just in this preliminary cut of various elements of the video I'll need to keep in mind before before it's complete. And this is something that I generally do. I often have a running list of B-roll that's needed, although in this case it's both video and audio effects because, again, construction. I'll go more in depth on that later, but I've also been using the notes from before as well as this rough cut through that I just did to build an outline to help with whatever voiceover or post-project narration I end up using to tie the whole project together. So, having done a couple hours of work already this morning, it is now time to go film before the machines start back up for the week. Ooh, good timing, my fridge just kicked in. Hello, background noise. So if you've watched a video of mine, you'll know I generally keep my storytelling pretty simple. I am not trying to be the next Tarantino, everything is very linear, but that doesn't mean that it was actually filmed necessarily in order. It actually happens pretty frequently that things are filmed out of order, whether that's something as simple as some B-roll for some aesthetic transitions, or maybe I filmed an introduction at the beginning of the project, but by the time I finished, I thought of a better way to do it, or another way I wanted to frame the project. Lots of different reasons come up that lead to non-linear filming, and here is just one of them. Alright, so here I've got a perfect example of some non-linear filming. So where I'm at right now in the project is I have just tested out whether this method of attaching the extension of the skirt onto the main body of the skirt will actually work. And I did that all last night off camera. So I sewed on the button loops and I threaded everything together and tried it out to see if it was going to give the effect that I wanted. But of course I didn't film any of that, so now I have to go through today and film it all for you as if I was doing it live. But because everything is all assembled, I also have to film it kind of in reversed order. So this morning, already today, I filmed first me trying the skirt on with the extension attached, testing it out, seeing if I liked the way the fabric flowed and moved. And then just right now, I filmed me pulling out the ribbon from it. But I now need to go through and actually put the ribbon back through. I need to film me inserting the ribbon, and then after I film that, I'm going to take the button loops off, but I'm going to film then me sewing a little section of the button loop strip back on so that I have that to use to show y'all in the actual video. So things are being filmed in reverse order because that's just the way that's most efficient for filming. You might be asking yourself, well, Shannon, why didn't you just wait and do all of it today and film it in real time as you were really doing it? And there are kind of two reasons. One is sometimes I just feel like working when the light's not right, or I just need to get some work done off camera. But also, in a situation like this, I didn't know if this technique was going to work. I didn't know if attaching the two halves of the skirt together with this fun little button trim was gonna give me the effect that I was going for. And if it didn't, I wanted to have the time overnight to sort of marinate on the situation and try to come up with some backup solutions. So it is partly about just sometimes the brain wants to do some stuff off camera, but also it's about keeping the project moving and making progress forward and giving myself time to problem solve and stay on some sort of time frame. So that's where we're at right now. I'm going to go through and remove all of these button loops that I've sewn on, and then I'm going to sew a little section of it back on and film me doing that. And then we can move forward with the rest of the project in the correct chronological order. So what can I say? Sometimes it's just like that. Now, astute viewers of this channel are probably noticing that they never actually saw any of this footage. You might be thinking, Shannon, you're going to all this work to film something and it didn't even make it into the video. And let me tell you, that's just the way it goes sometimes. A lot of the time, in fact, because I do try to keep my videos moving along pretty fast, try to keep everyone's interest, and take you through the experience of making something with me without necessarily breaking down every single step, and that often means that there's a lot of stuff that I film that doesn't make it into the final video. In this case, I wanted to include the review of the black snail pattern I was using because I thought that would be useful for many of you, but that was a long chunk of talking and the video was ending up at over half an hour, which is just too long, so some stuff had to go, and this was one of the sections that seemed the least relevant to the story. Now, sometimes longer versions of whole videos, or maybe just the little sections that I cut, do end up on my Patreon page, so if you're interested in seeing the full version, you can head on over there and join my lovely crafty community, check out all the bonus footage that's over there. But in general, I do feel like the tighter editing leads to a better final product. It's that whole concept of kill your darlings. Sometimes you've just gotta cut those really nice, beautiful shots. So let's jump forward a bit to the end of the project. The garment is completed, the reveal has been shot, so now it's time to sit down and edit, right? Well, almost. Remember those lists I made earlier? Well, it's time to go back and get those shots. And most noticeable for this project is that I had to shoot, or well, reshoot a lot of clean audio and sound effects. So I had to wait until the weekend when there wasn't too much traffic, there was no construction noise outside, then go get my camera and my good microphone and go through that list and record some ASMR. These then get imported into my editing software, cleaned up, the background noise eliminated, and then I manually retime the audio to match the movements of the original clips. This is not something I have to do for every video. I did have to do it a lot more here just because of all that construction noise. Good timing. But I do have to do it a lot more than you'd think because it's really noisy here, and especially if it's hot and I've got the doors and windows open, often you hear the traffic more than you hear the sewing noises. And the sewing sound effects aren't the only audio that get cleaned up. I go through every single dialogue track and process it because even though I do record with a pretty decent microphone and that does really improve the quality of the audio, huge shout out to my Ko-fi and Patreon members whose support allowed me to buy this nice mic in the first place. Thank you so much. If you would like to become a monthly supporter and get lots of bonus content, the links are in the description. I do still need to get rid of some small amount of background noise in every clip that has dialogue. So each and every video clip has their audio exported into my audio software. I use Audacity because it's free, and I get rid of the background noise. Then I import it back into my video editing software. I use DaVinci because it's free, and I sync it back up with the visual. These are the little touches that usually are subtle enough that they usually go unnoticed. Most people are only aware of audio quality when it's unusually bad, but I do feel like they subconsciously contribute to a better viewing experience, especially if you're listening with headphones where the audio tends to be a bit crisper. So then the editing starts for real, and it takes me about an hour to edit 1 minute of footage. So we're looking at 25 to 30 hours just of editing per video. And I'm not gonna take you through all of that because it's really hard to make editing entertaining, but just briefly, when I'm editing, I tend to do it in waves, sort of refining and tweaking as I go. On my first rougher passes, I again keep a list of additional B-roll or things that need to be added. Usually they're clips from previous videos, and each pass just gets more and more refined. Then once the video has reached its final length, I go through and play with the audio levels, make sure everything is all normalized so that you don't get a nasty surprise when changing scenes or switching audio clips. Then I quickly color grade, a process that I don't particularly enjoy or have much expertise in, so any professional editors out there, I beg your pardon. I keep reminding myself that in real movies or even larger YouTube channels, there are entire teams of people doing this. Sometimes there's literally one person whose sole job is color grading, but here on Shannon Makes, it's just me doing everything and constantly trying to improve one little bit at a time, so I try not to be too hard on myself. Then the last steps are making the thumbnail, which I'm sure we've all seen the funny clips of creators trying to pose for the thumbnail and get a bunch of different angles so that you have options. I find thumbnails incredibly annoying and frustrating because you can have the most interesting video in the world, but if your thumbnail and title aren't good, it won't matter one bit because nobody will click on it. Then, once the video is uploaded and the details are all filled out, there's one last part of the process that always takes forever, and that is editing the subtitles. Now, if you listen to some YouTube gurus out there, they'll tell you not to bother.
One thing that I used to do because someone told me to do it was I would actually manually upload captions to my YouTube videos. And so it's just a waste of money. And what I found was when I stopped doing this, I got the same amount of views, the same amount of results. It did not make a difference.
I find that approach blatantly ableist. Sure, editing the captions might not improve the cold, hard stats of your channel, but what about the deaf community, non-native English speakers, people with auditory processing difficulties, or even just those of you who watch on mute on your daily commute? So generally speaking, I do try to go in and edit my captions by hand because while YouTube's auto-generated captions are improving slowly, I have literally seen the improvements over the last 3 years, I still have to tell it every single video that no, I'm not a historical consumer. And if I have multiple people on the channel, like when Aura and I looked at historical magazines together, well, forget it. The auto-generated captions are completely unequipped to handle 2 or more people speaking. This is also why whenever I add text to the screen, I try to make sure it's not on the center bottom where the closed captions go. So if you ever see text in a strange place on screen, that's probably why. So that's just another mostly invisible step that I take that adds usually at least 45 minutes to the process, but hopefully improves the viewing experience for at least some percentage of you out there. Also, I know I do occasionally forget to do this and I apologize. Sometimes my life is just crazy busy and it honestly slips my mind, but I'm doing my best and I do try to remember. Now, if you enjoyed this look behind the scenes, be sure to let me know. I'm so familiar with this process that I have a hard time judging if I shared too much or not enough, and what parts are interesting, so I'd love to hear your input. Let me know what you found the most surprising or interesting, the part of the process that you never considered, or if you make videos yourself, the part that you most related to. Would you like to see another video like this down the road? And if so, what parts would you like to see covered in more depth? Thank you, the viewer, so much for watching. This channel wouldn't exist if you weren't here watching and liking and commenting and having a generally good time, I hope. So thank you all so much, each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye! Could not have been better timing. My roommate literally just walked in the door.